Já estamos online. Boa noite a todos e a todas do YouTube, do Facebook e de onde você estiver vendo a gente. Bem-vindo ao Climb Talks, o novo formato de entrevista da revista Blog de Escalada. Hoje não vai ser espanhol, hoje vai ser em inglês a nossa entrevista. A gente está com o Tyler Norton, que é o criador do Pastic Weekly, que é um podcast dedicado à cobertura de campeonatos, de eventos competitivos de campeonatos, e a gente vai falar com ele sobre os formatos de campeonatos do IFSC, vamos falar da Olimpíada, e eu não vou deixar ele escapar sem falar quem é que vai ganhar na Olimpíada. Tyler, good night for you, good evening for you, good night, and thank you very much for accept our invitation and for talking with me with a bizarre accent, probably you are sensing right now, and please tell our audience how you begin to climbing.
Well, thanks, Luciano, for having me. It's nice to, anytime I get to talk to somebody who isn't from Canada or North America, who is obsessed with climbing, it's really nice to meet new people. So thank you for your invitation.
You're welcome.
Climbing, I was never an athletic kid. I was really into music just on the other side of the computer, all of my instruments from high school. But I never really enjoyed sports because I didn't think I was very good at them. But one day, an adventurous friend of mine dragged me to the local climbing gym, which had just opened in my town. And I really enjoyed it. I felt like I was good at it. You know, I'm very tall and really skinny, so I'm light and it's easy for me to get up the wall. And it was the first time I felt confident doing a sport. So it made me feel really good. And I'm sure everybody remembers their first time climbing, especially in a gym. You have all these questions of, you know, how do I get to the top? How do I get to this hold? Or maybe how do they, you know, build these climbing routes? How do you get better at this overall? And it was just that kind of, all of those opportunities to be curious about climbing and learn more has really taken me from that like very first day of climbing at the gym all the way till now, which is still just trying to chase the answers to questions about climbing. And it's, you know, now I don't care so much anymore about how to be a better climber myself, but now I'm really interested in how to make climbing better for everyone, whether you're a customer at a gym or if you're a spectator watching a competition. So that's my story, basically.
Very nice. You have a podcast, the Pastic Weekly. How you came with this idea and how the audience accept this kind of format for talking about climbing inside, climbing indoors, for example?
Yeah, I think it started out, you know, I had been working at one gym for a while and I was getting a little bit bored and I needed something new to keep me interested in climbing. And at the time I had just started listening to podcasts for the first time. This was about 2017. So I was maybe a little bit late to discovering podcasts compared to other people. But I learned a lot about how people were running different podcasts. And I thought, you know, I could probably do something like that. And I think what made me really want to do it was all of my best memories from working and climbing were those moments where you get to meet somebody from somewhere else, like we're doing right now, and you get a chance to learn how other people are doing stuff, and it changes how you look at climbing within your own area. And I knew that if I did a podcast, I could not only give myself those opportunities, I would get to talk to somebody new all the time, but I could also start sharing it with other people who are curious, because I know that I've been relatively lucky where I've been fortunate to go to conferences or World Cups and meet these people. But there are some people who are interested who don't have that opportunity. And so if I can give them a chance to talk to photographers and judges and athletes that they might not otherwise get a chance to hear from, I think that just makes everybody, you know, learn a little bit more. So that's really what drove me to do it. And the audience reaction was really good because there are, you know, there's a million different podcasts about climbing, but very few of them are specific about climbing indoors. And I know that there will always be fewer people interested in this kind of stuff. I know more people want to learn about Alex Honnold and, you know, like you said, climbing in Patagonia and all this beautiful outdoor stuff. My audience will always be smaller, but those are the people that I can relate to, is people that are obsessed about indoor climbing.
Yes, that's cool. Canadians people, it's commonly known for be all the time polite people with manners and everything else. How is the haters on your podcast, on your content, on everything else? Because here in Brazil, Latin people, we're very passionate. So they are like Beavis and Butthead, or they are cool, or
Right.
they are the socks. How is the haters? How is the audience when not agree with some kind of thoughts or some kind of opinion on your podcast?
Yeah, I think, I think I'm in a good spot where before doing the podcast, I had some jobs where I did some volunteering up here as part of a governing body for climbing. So I was in charge somewhat of competitions in our area. And that's one of those jobs where you have to make decisions, and some people will like it and some people won't. And that really taught me to be confident in the decisions you make and understand why you made a decision. And if people disagree with you, that's okay. So that helped me take the criticism a little bit better. But honestly, there's not that much criticism of the podcast. The one thing is I name it Pastic Weekly, which suggests there's a new one every week, which is just not true anymore. I tried that and it was very difficult. So now it's, every couple weeks here and there. Sometimes I take a break. Sometimes there's a lot. So that's probably the one spot where you could really criticize me, is I'm very bad at following a schedule. But I laugh at myself about that. So it's pretty hard to bother me about it.
Understood. When you start the podcast, your Pastic Weekly, how long is your podcast? How old?
Yeah, it started about 4 years ago. So in 2017, I started it as an audio podcast, through iTunes. So something you would listen to on your phone. And then a couple of years ago, I decided I wanted it to be more video based, because I'm really interested in broadcasting and live streaming for events. And so I figured it would be better if I got more practice in front of a camera, basically.
Yeah. So the sport was already Olympic when you start your podcast. How, just before this, how you see climbing become Olympics and on Tokyo and on Paris 2024? How you see that will be good for the sport? Of course, will be good for the sport, but you can imagine what kind of revolution or what kind of impact will happen on the sport after premiere on Tokyo, and after that repeated on Paris 2024.
Yeah, I am. I think most people are very optimistic about 2020. And I am relatively pessimistic. I'm not very confident in the first edition, but for the future editions, I feel very good about them. In general, I am the kind of person that I don't like giving things a spotlight until I feel like they are really, really good products. And I worry a lot that the format for climbing at the Olympics for Tokyo is not a very good format. I'm sure most athletes agree it is not a good way to decide who is the best climber, because you have 3 different disciplines. And of course, you're running actually very few climbs. Bouldering, they only get 3 boulders in the final. There's only 1 lead route in the qualifications. It's a fairly random format for the sport. And so I think it could produce possibly some very random results that don't correlate with who we think is the best climber. But on top of that, it's a very, very long format to watch. It takes hours to get through the final round. And I don't think that's a very good way to get new viewers interested in watching the sport. So my concern with Tokyo is I'm not sure it's going to convert people watching into climbers right away. I am very confident that for the athletes, they're already seeing great rewards for being Olympic athletes. And for some of them, especially for people like Americans or the Japanese climbers, if they win the Olympics, just because they're a winner of an Olympic gold, their platform will rise so high in the social awareness of their country that they will promote the sport within their communities. I don't think it's going to be the Olympics directly that does it, but whichever athletes win, and if they have a good personality, and if they get all those sponsorships, and you see them drinking Coca-Cola and stuff, those athletes will be the ones that really promote the sport within their area. But in the future, as the sport breaks into the separate disciplines, as speed becomes its own format, I think that would be excellent for speed climbing. And then ultimately, as bouldering and lead climbing separate and hopefully get better formats, I think that'll be great for it. But overall, I kind of wish we were debuting at the Olympics with a stronger format that was easier to understand and not as long-winded.
So for the Olympics, you're seeing the glass half full.
Yeah, it's about
half full,
sure.
Or not half full.
I would probably say, compared to other people, I'm saying half empty in my opinion. Yeah,
of course. Here in Brazil or here in South America, we have some kind of difficulties because the rights for broadcasting the World Cup for IFSC and all their championships from Europe, it's not allowed to be even on YouTube for South America because some kind of network bought and sit on it or put on the drawer, or I don't know, put on that place, I don't know. And I have to bought some kind of VPN for see the the broadcasting for make my cover and everything else. And here in South America, you know the soccer or football. I don't know if you like it, it's football. If you don't like it, soccer. It's very popular here in South America. Brazil used to be the best, and it's not anymore. But we are still thinking we are the best. And we have some kind of rivalry with Argentina also, and only you have on television, on network, it's football all the time. And some kind of other sports like volleyball and basketball with NBA broadcasting. Also, it is on cable network, but not of climbing. How is the space for sport climbing be broadcasting there on Canada?
Yeah, in Canada, we are, I would say, one of the lucky countries because our broadcast rights haven't been sold. So we watch it on YouTube. Of course, we're an English-speaking country, so we get the English, the broadcast, which is the only broadcast that the IFSC makes. Yeah. So for us, it's very easy, and we're really lucky in that regard. I know sometimes the USA has had some issues. I'm not sure if that's I think they still get the World Cup broadcast, but for some other events, they have had broadcasts sold to the Olympic channel or ESPN. But for us, YouTube is still okay. I feel terrible for the countries that have their rights sold to a channel, but even more so if that channel is expensive to watch or doesn't even show it, because the IFSC then earns some money from it, but you are not supporting the climbers from South America. And, that is a real mess. And especially when, more and more young people, when they're watching video, they're not watching it on TV, they're watching it over the internet. And if, you do live streamings, you know that there are events, and my other background is in esports, watching a lot of Counter-Strike, and it's not uncommon for a competition to broadcast an event in English, and then they just give permission to somebody like you or somebody like me, and they say, you just broadcast it on your channel, but turn off the audio and you can broadcast it in Portuguese for your audience. And so you have one broadcast, awesome, but everybody in the world has somebody from their country that's giving great commentary in their language for free, right? And I feel like the IFSC is a bit behind in that. And that's one of those spots where I think we're trying to be a grown-up sport, possibly too quickly. I don't think we're quite there yet. And I think there is so much room for us to become a global sport and really grow the number of people that like watching it. But for the interest of a little bit of broadcast money, which I don't know where it goes, that money, it's not going to give bigger prizes to athletes. It's kind of a shame. I that's one of my disagreements with the way the IFSC works for broadcasting.
Just this, or just this is one of the 1,000.
It's one of many, not quite 1,000. I sympathize with what the IFSC is charged with doing.
Yes, of course.
It's an incredibly hard job, and whoever does it will be criticized. But I disagree with some of their decisions. I agree with some others.
If you do well, you have less criticized.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you scroll through all the negative comments faster if you do a better job, right? So
yes.
Yeah.
And you have Canada, not you. Canada has 2 athletes classified for the Olympics. The air network or cable network gives some kind of, I don't know, highlights for these 2 athletes, or they are completely unknown there?
They're still relatively unknown. The Olympics is always broadcast by either our state broadcaster, the CBC, or the only other real big channel, CTV here. And I'm pretty sure it's CBC this time around, if I remember that right. So our 2 athletes, Sean McCall and Alana Yip, they are starting to show up more in news broadcasts and in advertisements and things like that. So it's growing, but climbing is still very small in Canada. It's not, even though we have 2 Olympians, it is not something that if you asked a random person in the street, who are Canada's 2 Olympic climbers, most people still don't know that climbing is in the Olympics. And so that's kind of what I'm talking about, is it's a very high bar for us to clear to really increase the awareness of the sport. It has to be a very good show that people want to watch. Otherwise, they're just going to change the channel to, volleyball, for instance, or whatever else is just more exciting to watch. So I'm very proud of Sean McCall and Alana Yip. I had a lot of doubts about Sean McCall just because he's one of the older athletes and he has had to deal with some injuries in the past couple seasons. But I'm extremely happy that he gets to, enjoy this success towards the end of his career. And I think he has a great chance of doing very well. Both of them, him and Alana, do.
Yes. The other thing, the Canada and the United States get together and create the North American series with 6 rounds. Am I right?
5. Yeah.
5. 2 on Canada, 3 on the United States. Will be in theory easy for go to there, and probably will have some kind of classify for the athletes not to be populated too much. On your opinion, this was a good idea, or will be better be the Canadian Cup, the North American Cup on theory, and after that, thinking for Paris 2024, this kind of format?
Yeah, I am very happy that this series is happening. I imagine Brazil has the same kind of issues. Like most of the countries in South America are fairly big countries. And if you want to climb with other talented climbers on the other side of your country, you have to fly there, and it's probably expensive. It is difficult within just Canada or just the United States to get the best climbers together to compete against each other. And so I think this is a very good opportunity to get more climbers working together. I think that's probably the first step if you want to really develop excellent talent, is make sure that your best climbers get to be together as often as possible, because they will inspire each other and drive each other to climb harder. And right now you can have, the best climber on my side of the country might never get to climb against Alana Yip for even 2 years sometimes. And that's not good enough for trying to inspire talent and bring up the next athletes. So now, with the idea that some Americans will also be involved, I think that's great for Canadian athletes and Americans too. Practically, though, I am concerned that there's not going to be that much crossover between Americans coming to Canadian events and Canadians coming to American events. The distances are still very large. At the moment, there is no prize money unless the gym that hosts it wants to pay prize money, from what I understand. The only major incentive is to earn points as an athlete towards being on the Canadian national team, which for some athletes is an incentive. But there are other opportunities through the calendar, and we'll kind of have to see how that plays out. So I'm very happy that it's happening, but I think it is just the start, and I'm interested to watch if it does do its job of mixing Canadian and American athletes together, or if they're just going to stay in their own countries.
Understand. And the most, I don't know, some kind of polemic stuff here. Do you like or do you hate the speed climbing?
I love speed climbing. I regret to say that if you search back on the internet far enough, you will find an old post from me saying how bad speed climbing is. But I think all of us were probably like that at one point. I'm curious to hear what you think. But for me, my first opportunity to watch real speed climbing was in 2015 at Canada hosted a Speed World Cup at the same time that we hosted one of our national events. And so that is why I was there. And so I watched it for the first time live, for the first time on a real wall, and for the first time with the best speed climbers in the world. And the climbing itself was interesting, but what stunned me was the audience around me, which was just full of Canadians, none of whom speed climb. Like nobody in Canada speed climbs, especially not 6 years ago. And so all of these people around me who don't do this sport and who don't know the names of half of the athletes on the wall were so excited and interested and invested in who would win each race. And that really ticked me over and realized, I can't speed climb. The kids that I coach cannot speed climb yet, but there is something really valuable here. And I have really come to embrace it and understand it. And it's become something that, I'm really grateful now for to have something like speed climbing. And it is, to tell you the truth, if from my perspective of how things get to the Olympics, I think it would have been best for climbing if speed climbing was by itself at the Olympics in 2020. I think watching a speed competition is so fun and it's so fast and just so easy to understand. I think it would have been better to have that event by itself at the Olympics and try and get bouldering and lead later on, in my opinion. I think that would have been a better show, and I think it would have generated a lot more interest than having all three of them together this time around.
Yes, I have almost the same opinion of you. At the beginning, I hate the speed climbing. I hate. For me, it's the worst thing ever. The worst thing ever. It's like all the movies from Adam Sandler is better than the speed climbing. But after watching on the Youth Olympics on Buenos Aires, I was there covering for my website, and see the people, the reaction for all the people who don't understand about climbing, because speed climbing was the morning, about 8 o'clock of morning or something like that, 9 o'clock of morning, and was only people who don't climb was there, and they was very exciting and very interesting. And I thought, well, probably it's because of this will be our, I don't know, invitation. It's like when you start to, I don't know, smoke marijuana or something like that. You just give a bite and this is interesting.
We call it like a gateway drug up here.
Yes,
the
gateway drug.
One, right?
Yes, I was forgetting the expression. But I think different. I think it's better for the format on the Paris will be bolder, will be leading, but some kind of tasty for not for shuffle the chances. It's speed climbing and boulder, and speed climbing and leading, because I cannot sleep at night knowing there's a person who only dedicates his time or her time for speed climbing and not for boulder and not for leading.
That's interesting.
Yes. And will be some kind of tasting for it. We will talking about this later. Will be some kind of tasting to shuffle the chances for, I don't know, unhuman persons like Adondra, Yanya Gambret, Akio Noguchi, Miho Nonaka, Alex Megos, Tomoa Narazaki. That means the speed climb will shuffle the chances. Of course, Yanya wins everything, but sometimes someone can raise the bar for the chances and not will be some kind of, I don't know, so easy for the person wins.
Right.
Has to sweat a little bit.
Yeah. I think, my biggest thing is I think you and I both agree that speed climbing you have to respect it as a sport. It is just as impressive as running, sprinting, right? You go in a straight line for not very far, and if you get there first, you win. And speed climbing deserves that respect because it is this pure focus on becoming the best at something. And I think because it's so different from the other two disciplines in that regard, I think it is fair to separate them. And the other angle I want to mention is, the goal the whole time with the Olympics has been one day we want a medal for bouldering and a medal for lead and a medal for speed, right? That is everything to have its own medal. And it looks like that will happen. So the strategy that the IFSC used to start with all three of them together, the strategy looks like it worked. And I can't blame them for that. They did a good job in that regard. They managed to get all three in there. And it looks like 8 years from now, we will see all three sports with their own medal. I just would have started the other way around because I think it will have a better first impression to the general public with just the speed event by itself because it is so pure. And truly, if you had to argue, what things should be Olympic sports in the modern day, it's easy to say things like running and things like speed climbing. It's harder to make an argument for hockey or football or golfing or, in my opinion, bouldering and lead climbing, because there are so many different parts of it. Team-based things I don't think so much of as Olympic sports, but also more creative sports like gymnastics or different types of dancing or ice skating. I personally put those in a separate area. And because there is a relative amount of randomness with route setting, you never know what the climbers are going to climb. I feel like it should be the second set of disciplines to make it to the Olympics. I think speed climbing, in my opinion, should have been first, but I can't argue with the strategy the IFSC chose because it worked. So I give them props for that. They've probably succeeded in their goal.
Yes, but I think it's depends of two things to become popular. For example, for you, probably you don't know this, but you know the sport. Do you know curling is very, very famous here in Brazil?
Really?
Really?
I had no idea. I thought that was just us.
No, it's because at the time, one air network bought the whole rights for the Olympic. And because of that, was some was part of the deal, bought also the Winter Olympics. So they broadcast at the daylight the Winter Olympics here. And some kind, I don't know, some kind of that reason, only God can explain, they are start to broadcast curling. And with the teapot and the person with the broom and everything. And person starts to stop and watching this on the bars, on the restaurants, like thinking is funny, but it's really interesting. And we are to know more. And because of that, they are starting to create some kind of, I don't know, summer curling here in Brazil, because you never know if some kind of sport can become popular on other country, because the only thing is one network that bought some rights for broadcasting bet this kind of weird sport, sorry, weird sport can please people from Brazil, and they bet and they got it. I think for climbing it's the same thing.
That's a great story. I didn't know that at all. I think that's
Yes,
very interesting.
There's a curling team from Brazil, in fact.
Wow. That's they have to make a movie about that. I would watch that. That would be great.
Yes. For me also, it's because at the beginning, from the broadcasting on streaming from IFSC, I also training CrossFit every day, and I watch the CrossFit girls from the ashes become a very popular sport around the world, and has some kind of channel on the CrossFit with a show, with athletes, with commentator and everything else. After that, I don't know, the honor becomes crazy and dismantle everything else. On the other hand, IFC has the same, starts to build a sport, become Olympic, the channel on YouTube become more popular, and after that starts to dismantle all this stuff, firing Eddie Falk, and I don't know if he's firing or he asked to leave Charlie Bosco. What's your opinion about that IFC wants to be more, I don't know, person, not attached to any person or any name, to be, I don't know, like other sports, just a business?
Yeah. So to start, my understanding is Charlie Bosco left on his own decision. I think he was genuinely done after 5 years. He's got all these different talents and interests, so I think he was happy to move on, and that was his decision. For Eddie, I'm hesitant to say he was fired, just because the IFSC hasn't really given their opinion of the side of things, but Eddie Falk certainly stopped being hired for some jobs. So my opinion in general is I don't mind that someone like the IFSC is interested in making personnel changes for different reasons. Maybe some people are less expensive, and one argument that we made in the episode was just that it would be nice if there was a World Cup in let's say in Brazil. It would be nice if one of the two people that was doing the broadcast was from Brazil or from South America, and lent a bit of a local flavor to the broadcast, and knew knew some of the route setters and knew some of the athletes. And so I like the fact that the IFSC is using Matt Groom for the European events so far, and they have a Canadian guy who's going to do the Salt Lake City events, Pete Woods. I'm very excited for him. And so maybe they will do someone from China or something like that for the Asian events. I kind of like that idea in general. And for photographers, I'll start with the why it makes sense. Moving someone like Eddie around the globe is relatively, somewhat expensive. Whereas there's some argument to say that by having a photographer from Europe for the European events is cheaper, someone from North America for the North American events. You can understand that, right? Now, there are some other decisions that they make as an organization that I would say is a waste of money. I think there are some people from the IFSC that go to events who do not need to be there. And I think that could be money better spent in other areas. But the one thing about Eddie that's really tough is he has been doing it for long enough where I don't understand why he wouldn't be sent to the Olympics. Like, you have to kind of give a good reason for somebody who is very well respected among the community. He is very well respected by the athletes. He's been present for so long. He's been an advocate for the athletes and for the sport. And he's someone, at the very least, you would say, if he's no longer going to be working for you, make an Instagram post that just says thank you, make a tweet, like anything so small, just some way to say thank you very much for doing so much for us. And to not even do that, but to instead to kind of drop him off of your off of the contracts and not put him on the circuit anymore, it feels like it was out of touch. It feels like they didn't understand how important he was to the scene and how much he had given to be a part of these events. So that felt like it was very mishandled. And I think that is ultimately the story. Is there is a certain level of unprofessional conduct when it comes to maybe how some people are hired or fired. And that's not just necessarily with people like Eddie. There are also some people that have other complaints about things like that. It's all rumors and hearsay, so I don't want to expand on it because I don't know for sure. So I'm sad that he won't be there. But ultimately it is the IFSC's decision. I just hope that when they make these decisions, that they understand who it is that they're letting go. Eddie's somebody who I think is very constructive part of the scene. And I know he'll stick around, but he's the kind of person that, frankly, I think he should be one of the people who is on camera sometimes. He knows the athletes very well. He can tell you who's injured and who's not, and who's feeling good this morning and who isn't. So it's really too bad that the IFSC didn't recognize how valuable he was to covering the sport.
Yes, you are so polite. My opinion, it's like you dating, you have a relationship for a person for a long time, the parents, the story of the family, the food and everything else, and after that you broke up and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
It's heartbroken like that. It's heartbroken like that.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Yes. And now we are closing to the final, but it's the part I was studying all day for this. Let's guess who will be the 4th better places on Olympics for men and women, please.
That's an impossible question, Luciano. That's difficult.
And if you miss it, I will send message for you, or you miss it after the result. Because I will be covering the Olympic Games on weightlift, and because the CrossFit and sport climbing for a radio here, and probably for air broadcast here in Brazil also. And because of that, I want to quote names all the time. My friend Tyler from Canada missed this kind of result, and because of that, I am asking to you right now.
You're putting me on the spot. Well, I think the first thing that people should understand when talking about like who might be a favorite in these in climbing, the only person who is a favorite is Janja Garnbret. She is the only one. You can't say Adam Ondra is a favorite. You can't say Jakob Schubert is a favorite. Janja is at a different level compared to her field than anyone else. So she is the only easy person that you say, Janja will come first. But even that, go ahead.
Excuse me. You want to listen my opinion about Janja?
Sure, yeah.
Janja will be the new Nadia Comaneci.
I don't know who that is.
The gymnastic was the first person on the history get the perfect 10 on Olympic gymnastic.
This just shows you how little I know about sports. Like climbing is the first sport that I'll take your word for it though. Okay.
Yes, because nobody wants to know about the gymnastics on Olympic. And after that, a little girl from, I think it's 10, 12 years old, amazed the world because get the perfect A.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone, how the person get the perfect, nobody gets the perfect A. The perfect 10.
Yeah.
A for the grades on a school. The perfect 10. And everyone was amazed about her. And after that, she becomes, I don't know, some kind of goddess for an Olympics. So, in my opinion, Yania Gambert will be the new Nadia Comaneci.
Okay. I think that's fair. I think, she is the only.
Go on. Sorry.
she is a standout. And I think Adamandra, might end up being one of the best climbers of all time. But as a competitor, he is maybe only, sometimes a little bit more successful than others. And he can also have very bad days, just like everybody else. So some people may consider him a favorite. I don't. Okay. So for the women, Yanya is my first, and the rest of them are going to be just a guess, Luciano. So I'm getting these wrong. I promise you. I'm going to, when the Olympics comes around, it's all going to fall apart. But Yanya first. I'm very interested to see basically people like Miho Nanaka and Shauna Coxey, who have taken relatively quiet years these last couple of years. Unfortunately, mostly due to injury for both of them. But I'm confident that that's maybe given them kind of like a different perspective on training and staying healthy. I also think they're in the sweet spot in terms of their age. And of course, they have the advantage, in my opinion, of being predominantly boulderers. I think that's the best sport to be a specialist in if you want to branch out to lead and speed climbing. So Shauna and Miho, if you need numbers, I'll put Shauna in second, Miho in third. Fourth is an absolute crapshoot. But you know what? For the sake of putting a Canadian in there, I'm going to say Alana Yip. For the guys, for the men, honestly, this is something where I'd say the difference between the favorite, the best guy, and the guy in second is like a 1% chance of who's more likely to win and who isn't. So I think if you took someone like Adamandra versus Jakob Schubert, you maybe say, they are more likely to win than someone like Tom Halloran from Australia. The difference is actually relatively small, in my opinion, because the format is so random. So I'm actually going to steal one from Charlie Bosco. When I asked him this question, he said Jakob Schubert was his favorite. I think that's not a bad answer. So I'm going to say Jakob Schubert is the favorite. I will say Tomoa Narasaki in second. I'll say Adamandra in third. And as a Canadian, I will say Sean McCall in fourth. And again, if you want to take that seriously, you can, but I can't overstate how much I think the results could be crazy, like nothing like what you'd expect. And it all comes down to the route setting. I can't explain that. Like, if there's one bad boulder problem, everything could be right out the window. It could really be nuts. And if it goes well, I'll give a lot of credit to the route setters, but also, you got to sit down and pray because it sometimes it just comes down to luck with something like this.
Yes, I believe you. And can you tell me how is the main difficulties to cover the competition of climbing on the world? Because rarely or barely it's broadcasting. Sometimes climbers don't want to be criticized or don't want to be analyzed. And we have some kind of different levels of climbing. Like we have the sport climbing on North America with all the Americans, all the Canadians. They are so much better than us for Latin America for several reasons. And how hard is to cover the competition climbing?
In what regard? I feel like I need to ask you to clarify. How is it? How
hard for you to get the information, to prepare the content for analyze some kind of competition, some kind of a failed competition about because I asking you because of this. If you criticize or make some kind of some kind of critic about some kind of CEO from Canadian climbing or USA climbing, they get angry with you,
right?
And we will remember this all the time. And as we are a small sport, probably if you are covering this, you suffer this. I suffered this about 15 years. You can imagine. If you make some kind of critic because nobody's perfect, still persons hold regrets about it. How hard, on your opinion, it's covered the climbing competition scene?
Yeah, I'll focus on your second part, kind of dealing with how sometimes if you say things that people don't like, you can suffer for it. It is difficult. In one way, it's difficult because it's very hard to get information sometimes. Even if you're just trying to look up the history of World Cups, tell me who won, this World Cup or who came sixth or whatever. It can be very difficult to actually find records of events. And it's even harder when you go to a regional or continental or national level. Like if I tried to find Canadian results from 5 years ago, I don't know if I would be able to find them. And I was probably there. I probably watched it, but I don't know where the results are anymore. So that is one thing that makes covering climbing very difficult, is we have done a bad job of preserving our history and keeping our records accessible to other people. But the other part of criticizing people is something where I think you just have to, number one, be prepared for it and say, if I believe in what I'm saying, if I believe that the criticism I'm offering somebody is fair, and I can give good reasons for my opinion, then I'm just going to have to do that. I'm just going to have to say what I believe, because it's very easy to think that, for example, between myself and let's say the executive director for Climbing Canada, I've only spoken with her twice. We have a very good relationship. We've never been critical of each other. But let's say one day her and I disagree over something. So long as I respect that she cares about her job and is trying to do it well, and she respects that I'm not trying to cancel anyone or burn any bridges just for the sake of creating chaos, I think at the very least you have to, if you're running things, if you're an executive director, you have to expect criticism. And if you are a journalist, especially one giving an opinion, you have to expect criticism as well, because not everybody's going to agree with you. And it's very easy, if I'm arguing with somebody in a powerful position like that, to think that one of us has to win, that only one of us is right and the other person will lose and maybe lose their job and everything falls apart. But that isn't true. You're going to have about half of your audience will agree with you and about half of your audience will agree with them. And I think it's really important right now for people covering climbing to start having more discussions like that, because there's very little investigative journalism. There's very little critical journalism about athletes or about the IFSC or whoever. Mm-hmm. And we are getting to the point where, number one, there is starting to be more money coming in through sponsorships and through the Olympics. And number two, there doesn't seem to be a lot of new people willing to take some of those jobs in the IFSC. And we're now seeing some people that have been working at the IFSC for very, very, very long periods of time. Marco Scalaris was just reelected for another 4-year term. It's going to take him to 2025, I guess. He's been effectively running this for 20 years. I think he started as the president of I might be wrong about this. I know he was leading the IFSC in 2007. I'm pretty sure he was leading the International Competition Committee of the UIAA in 2005 and possibly earlier. So that's about 20 years of being in charge of the international body. And now I don't know, and Marco Scaleras, from everything I've heard, including from people like Eddie Folk, is a good man and is a hard worker and cares about climbing. But if there is this much money, and I'll be honest, I don't trust big sports organizations. Like you talk about football. Do you trust the people that run FIFA? Like, does FIFA have a good reputation of protecting its athletes, or, you know, making good decisions for the public interests? Like there's opportunity for corruption. And even if there isn't any corruption or, you know, bad faith operating in the IFSC yet, we need to have people like yourself and maybe like myself that will ask those questions and will be critical of those things. Because when something bad happens, the only way we'll find out and the only way we'll fix it is if it gets shared with the rest of the world. If nobody's looking for it, if nobody's asking questions, they just get away with it. And that's not a good thing for our sport.
Yes, I don't know if you know, the name from Olympic Committee here in Brazil was arrested by corruption after 20 years on the Comité Olympic here in Brazil. Just for example.
Yep.
For example.
I don't know what it is about you know, sports stuff, but I'll be honest, it's clear that when you get into big international organized sports, you have to be careful. There is apparently a lot of people willing to pay a lot of money to make bad decisions. And now that we're an Olympic sport, I think we have to be very, very careful of that stuff. So
yeah, and at this part, I have 2 quotes to do. The first one from Stan Lee, from Uncle Ben on Spider-Man.
Right.
With great powers, you have great responsibilities.
Yes.
And after that, another series from Argentina. I don't know if you're watching Netflix, but as you are on quarantine, probably you watch a lot of Netflix.
Sure.
Call it Gate 7. It's about a girl who is become some kind of manager from a football team. And it seems impossible and everything else, with corruption, with mafia and everything else. It's a very good one. It is on Spanish. You have to see subtitles. And there's one quote in that movie I like. When the girl was really, really tired of everything, one guy sit on her side and said, only because seems and it is impossible to change the football, everything else, but only because seems impossible, this is not an excuse for you to not try it.
I couldn't agree more with that.
And I think it's the same for IFSC, because we have a person there with almost creating the sport, and because of that, changed the rules of the sport through the time. We have 5 boulders, after that 4 boulders, after that 3 boulders. We have, I don't know, all together on one competition on World Cup. We have some kind of, I don't know, really, really Brazilian thing on championships here. We have World Cup and we have the World Championship every 2 years. This is really confusing for sponsors, for broadcast television and everything else. So it's like you said, it's 20 years the same person. Why anyone can not be the CEO?
Yeah, I think that it's an interesting question, and I think that one thing is it's not a very fun job. I think there is
probably the only fun job is comedian.
That's fair. But I guess what I'd say is, I don't know how much he gets paid. I don't know what kind of perks he gets. I hope he gets rewarded for the work he does. But there's a lot of people that are very involved in sports, but one, how many people actually want to be the director of, or to be the president of the IFSC? That is, it is simply a difficult job, but he has also earned the reputation he has. He was a journalist for the long time before he was in climbing. And so I think, I don't know him well enough to judge him as a person. And I don't know really how the IFSC works inside to judge how well he's done his job. But when you've been in a job that long, you do have to start expecting people to examine how you're doing, because it is a bit of a red flag.
It's like, I will quote again something nerd. It's like Smeagol carrying the ring for 20 years, and people there from the creature, we are some kind of Frodo or everything else, we are watching the Smeagol. You are so much time. How long you have this ring and you did nothing? Mm-hmm. Smeagol. Tell me, Smeagol. It's like that, because the only thing, it's temptation.
Mm-hmm.
It's temptation.
Yeah, and again, I'm not making any of these comments about Marco Scaleras or anyone else on the board or in the IFSC, because I don't know enough. But it is the temptation. It is, when is it, let's just decide, okay, I'm going to go to every World Cup, and that's going to cost this many thousands of dollars every time, even though I don't really need to be there. It's
look at Scolares, look Daenerys Scolares, look Daenerys.
Yeah, that's a good example as well. It's something to look out for. But I wanted to go back to one thing you said, which was just because it feels like something can't be changed.
Yes, it feels like it's impossible. Mm-hmm. This cannot be an excuse for not trying.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the one big theme that I think is really important for countries like Brazil and Canada, for individual gyms to really take to heart. Now that we're in the Olympics, it is kind of, it kind of makes it so that it becomes harder for the IFSC to try new things, because we have this big commitment to the Olympics, and our World Championships and our World Cup mean so much because they're connected to the Olympics, that it's going to make it harder for us to try new things with how our competitions work. And I think that means it really becomes the responsibility of the smaller bodies, for Canada and for my gym and for whoever, to try different things when you're hosting competitions. Bouldering isn't always fun to watch. It's a very long competition, and sometimes people are sitting down for an awfully long time. Try a new boulder format.
Sit down.
Yeah. So try these different things, like try a boulder format for your next competition at your gym that that bears no resemblance to the current event. Just do something new and find out how different things work, because whatever change is going to come from the IFSC to make these more fun to watch probably isn't going to come from the IFSC anymore. It's probably going to be discovered by people in a gym or in a country somewhere else that try something and it turns out that it works. And I think that's really important for everybody to think of now that we're in the Olympics. We have to really contribute more to make the sport better, because I personally don't think that there's going to be that much change coming from the top any longer. It's really down to us.
Yes. Tyler, really, really thank you to talk to me, with exchange ideas with me, with the people here from Brazil who probably didn't know about your job, about your passion to cover and with amuse us with your opinion also. How the persons can get in contact with you or know better about your work on Pastic Weekly?
Yeah, the best place to go is after I'm sure you're on YouTube right now, so make sure you like and subscribe to this video that you're watching right now. Make sure you subscribe to Climb Talks, but then in the search bar, just type Pastic Weekly. My channel will come up. Subscribe to that too. Or you can visit plasticweekly.com. You can find my email or whatever else there.
Thank you. Tyler, really, really thank you. Be safe there. And I hope we can get together again and talk about the Olympics, the stuff we enjoy to talk right now.
Thank you very much, Luciano. It was great meeting you, and obrigado por me convidar.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Bye.